Well, last year, Nick Chubb only had 7 carries inside the 5-yard line. Not a big number. But remember, Carlos Hyde had a bunch of them too. Carlos Hyde had 10. If you combine those two, 17 carries inside the 5-yard line for Nick Chubb and Carlos Hyde, that would have been the second most in the NFL behind only Todd Gurley. So as we get to the second round, there were, a pretty decent amount of second-round busts last year. Jay Ajayi and DeMarco Murray, really them. And then the third round was much worse than that. But, all right, we got Gurley at 14. We got Mixon at 16, Chubb at 17, and Dalvin Cook at 19. I'm going to throw Kerryon Johnson in this mix because he should be there after the Theo Riddick news, and he will go in the second round in a lot of leagues. So how do you guys, Heath, how do you break that down? We got Gurley, Mixon, Chubb, Dalvin Cook, and Kerryon Johnson. Are there, and if you want to talk about Fournette, we can do that as well. Are there guys you're definitely avoiding, guys that you're definitely targeting? How do you feel about this group of guys?
I think I've drafted Todd Gurley once this year. It was the very end of the second round, and he's at the back of this group for me, regardless of format, whether it's non-PPR or PPR. Joe Mixon's first in this group, regardless of format. So those are the only two things that are set in stone, though, because I feel like Chubb is one of those guys. We talk about guys whose value varies a lot from non-PPR to PPR, and his does for me because I've got him right behind Mixon when it comes to non-PPR. He falls behind Dalvin Cook and Kerryon Johnson in PPR formats. And it does kind of depend, though, because if something happens and Duke Johnson just like this hamstring, air quotes, doesn't allow him to play at all, we might see Chubb more involved in the passing game, and that would give Chubb the potential to be a top 5 running back. But as it is right now, I think Johnson in the first half of the season and Kareem Hunt in the second half of the season is going to limit his upside a little too much in PPR.
Okay, so I'm getting excited about Chubb. I wasn't at first because of all of the things you just said, but he was really, really good last year. And if you're going to break the mold and be a top 5 running back without 50 catches, I think the Nick Chubb way is the way to do it. He's going to be certainly the primary ball carrier on what we think is going to be a very good offense. He'll probably get 90% of the goal line touchdowns. He'll catch some passes. I mean, he could get 40 catches. And I don't know if he in the first 8 games of the season is a total stud like he was after the Hyde trade last year and maybe even better in his second season. I don't know how much Kareem Hunt's really going to affect him, and I just, because we completely glossed over him yesterday, I wanted to spend some time on Nick Chubb.
But you have to factor in what Hunt could do, and that's the problem. It's if you want a guy who's going to get you off to a great start, he's the perfect guy. I mean, he could be the number 1 running back through the first 8 games. Yeah. I would not be surprised if that's the case. It's just a matter of what happens after that. And that's, you just have to factor that in. It's impossible not to. It could be totally nothing, like you said, Adam, where Kareem Hunt doesn't do a thing and is just a break glass in case of emergency type of player. Or he could take away 50% of the touches for him. We don't know. And that's the only uncertainty when it comes to Nick Chubb. As a player, he's awesome. Freddie Kitchens has talked him up from when I spoke to him at the Combine all the way through training camp. And we had Evan Washburn again. He was with Cleveland. He was on CBS Sports HQ with our show on FFT, and said the same thing. And it's obvious. You should love Nick Chubb, but it's just what happens when Kareem Hunt is there, and how many touches will he take away? I hope it's nothing. I really do. I hope it's just he's a 10% type of guy, but it could be worse, and that's the thing that you have to sort of worry about in any way, shape, or form when you're drafting him and comparing him to those other guys. Those other guys have huge, huge ceilings, but they have lower floors than Nick Chubb by far.
So how do you rank them? How do you rank Mixon, Gurley, Nick Chubb, Kerryon Johnson, Dalvin Cook?
It's all over the place for format. Gurley's behind those guys just because of the uncertainty with his knee. Mixon's ahead of them just because I think if everything goes right for him, he could be a top 5 guy. But, Fournette, Cook, and Chubb are all in similar situations. If you said 16 games of Nick Chubb with no Kareem Hunt, if they had not made that move at all, he'd be
like 5th,
easily in the top 5 conversation, easily.
Right.
But we don't know. That's the problem.
In general, do you like this group of running backs? Gurley, Mixon, Chubb, Cook, Kerryon? You love it.
Love it.
I like most of them.
Dave?
Yeah, I like most of them. I think these are.
You don't like Gurley?
Yeah, Gurley's a round 3 pick for me. Cook is 2. But Chubb, Fournette, Johnson in that order, and Mixon ahead of all 3 of those guys. Those are round 2 running backs, full show.
where do they go in terms of the top 7 wide receivers and Travis Kelce? How many of them are ahead of Kelce? How many of them are behind Kelce?
They're all behind Kelce. Just position scarcity is part of it, and just the way that a snake draft works is part of it. I'm going to value that tight end position quite a bit. So if I'm picking late in round 1 and I choose to not go receiver, Kelce will go ahead of them, and then I might consider Bell or Mixon with one of those early round 2 picks. I look at Chubb as a middle round 2 guy, Fournette and Johnson middle to late round 2, and those are the types of running backs that you pair with one of the stud running backs in round 1. If you're inclined to go running back with your first 2 picks, that's a hell of a duo to have.
This podcast is pretty pro Leonard Fournette, right?
Yep.
Yeah. It's hard not to be.
We talked about it yesterday.
It's just hard not to be.
I mean, it's hard not to be in some respects because the workload is just going to be amazing, and that's what you look for. But at the other end of the spectrum, this guy's been terrible on a per-carry basis each of his 2 seasons. He's a pain in the butt sometimes. The coaching staff and the organization had soured on him. He's injury-prone, quite injury-prone. He was injury-prone in college. I think a lot of people are going to be pushing back on some people are going to be with you for sure. He'll be a polarizing player. Some people are going to be pushing back on Leonard Fournette.
So what sold me on it is just the upside. The upside that he gives. He has given you double-digit fantasy points in non-PPR 71% of his games. And 15-plus in PPR 62% of his games. It's great consistency. Great consistency for late round 2, by the way.
Adam, in our flex draft where you shamed somebody to drafting for you, I got him in the late 3rd round, and I was thrilled to death.
Yeah, I was surprised. That was really good. In an analyst draft, no less.
Yep.
Was a 3-receiver league, so. But still. Okay, so how about Damian Williams? Damian Williams currently 26 overall. He did practice. He's back at practice. This is Thursday, August 8th. Preseason football, by the way, tonight. Damian Williams, how does he fit in with this group of Gurley, Mixon, Chubb, Cook, Kerryon Johnson, and Leonard Fournette? Heath, where do you have Damian Williams right now?
He is behind most of that group. And again, he is kind of the anti-Chubb. In non-PPR, I don't like him near as much. In PPR, I haven't really moved him down that much. I do have him ahead of Chubb in PPR, or ahead of Gurley in PPR, but behind him in non. He might actually have more upside than anyone in that group and a lower floor than anyone in that group. And listen, the first day back at practice, he was not taking even a majority of the first team snaps. I want to see over the next week how that hamstring reacts. I'm going to be very concerned if at some point in early mid-August, Williams has another setback with the hamstring. And I think Andy Reid will be as well. But if he doesn't, and if that was just a little blip on the radar and Damian Williams is the starting running back week 1 and the starting running back week 16, you're most likely looking at a top 5 running back.
I never doubted Damian Williams at all. Look, I agree with everything Heath said. It's just and I'll try and stay consistent with this, that I think he's the best guy. I hope he's the best guy because of where he's being drafted so far and what the upside is for him. But if he can't stay on the field, it's obviously a huge problem for him if you're investing a 2nd-round pick in him. And he's in the same category. I think you have to put him in the same category with Fournette, with Cook, with Gurley, with Kerryon, of anybody that has an injury concern, because A, we've never seen it from Damian Williams before. And I hate to use that argument because the same thing about talking about a rookie. But we haven't seen it from him in a featured role. But there's 5 years of him being in the NFL and never either A, taking advantage of the situation because he couldn't stay healthy, or B, never getting the opportunity. And when he did get the opportunity last year, it was fantastic. But can he do it from day one? And so far, the answer is no. So I hope to see him take advantage of the situation and perform at what an Andy Reid type running back can be. But there's a veteran that they like, and there's a young guy that they like, and that may be a problem for him.
Would you guys take Kerryon Johnson or Damian Williams?
Kerryon. Wow.
Yep.
Would you take Dalvin Cook or Damian Williams?
It was Riddick getting cut that pushed me over the top on Kerryon. I'll take Williams over Cook.
Yeah, I'll take
Dalvin.
Cook. Yeah, I think Dalvin's got a much higher ceiling just as a player. The situation makes it very, very close because, again, Andy Reid and his history suggests awesomeness. But pedigree, it's Dalvin by far. And so if he stays healthy, he'll be better.
So I got to tell you, man, this is a make or break group of running backs. And then you can throw in Aaron Jones, Marlon Mack in this group because they're both going in the top 32 picks as well. So when
Jones will slide, though.
Well, I don't know if people are going to – if he's back at practice soon, then I don't know. I'm not convinced. How far do you think he'd slide?
I think he slides closer to the end of the third round and maybe into the fourth round. And remember, our drafts help dictate that because people look at our mock drafts and our rankings are starting to slide with him too, especially if you're looking at our ADP.
Well, all I'm saying is, and then you want to throw Devontae Freeman in there, man, it's an enticing group.
Freeman's going to rise.
Serious upside. I don't think that he should. I just, man, do they split carries in Atlanta? Bottom line, you can make cases for and against these guys. They excite me and scare me at the same time. I don't, and I love the wide receivers going in this range. So I don't know if I have a top 4 pick, I might regret it, but I've been finding myself passing these guys up a lot, and that upsets me because I do want a share of these guys. But just reading the busts from the previous 2 years and how many of them were second and third round picks, who we no doubt were extremely excited about this time of year 2017.
Nobody liked Jerick McKinnon last year.
I mean, I was excited about Jay Ajayi, Dalvin Cook himself, Leonard Fournette at times. It's Alex Collins.
That's the one that sticks out for me.
If you look at this group and you want to start with Le'Veon Bell, that's fine. You want to start with Dalvin Cook, but you just go down the list. Dalvin Cook, Kerryon Johnson, Leonard Fournette, Todd Gurley, Devontae Freeman, Marlon Mack, Aaron Jones, Damian Williams. That group of running backs, we were talking about 20 to 30% of the top 24 busting. The bust rate in that group is probably closer to 40% this year, I would guess. Now, I'm not going to go out and say for sure which 4 or 5 it's going to be. And there's a couple of them that are probably going to make the leap into the top 6 running backs this year. But this is an extremely volatile group. And if you want safety, this is why you take wide receiver in this range.
Huge ceiling, huge ceiling, and in a lot of cases, low floor.
Okay. We can take a break in a second here, but I want to talk about Aaron Jones. Brutal schedule, but he showed in 2017 that he could do very well against the tough schedule. He faced some pretty good run defense. He only had 4 games in 2017 where he had big work, and he was good in all of them. 3 or 4 of the 4, and they were tough. That was a tough schedule. Last year, when Aaron Jones went on his awesome run midseason, it was a 7-game stretch where he was terrific. He was on pace for like 16 touchdowns. On a per-game basis, he would have been RB9 in both formats. The competition was extremely easy for Aaron Jones in that stretch, except for one game against Minnesota in which he did pretty well. Again, a lot to like, a lot that scares me. If he gets off to a slow start against the Bears and Vikings, do they get Jamal Williams or somebody else more involved? How do you feel about Aaron Jones? At one point, he was basically my favorite breakout. I don't have quite as much enthusiasm. Obviously, the injury doesn't help. But, where are you guys right now on Aaron Jones?
So Pete just spent a lot of time with the Packers in their joint practice with the Texans, and I asked him, what did you see from the line, and how do they look? And he said it could be one of the better ones in the league, if Billy Turner ends up doing, what they hope he can do with Bakhtiari, the other guys that they have there. I think if everything stays healthy for the Packers, which we know has been a big problem for them, from the quarterback on down, then Jones has a chance to still be productive even in the tough games because he'll be more involved in the passing game. I think the offense will be a little bit more creative, and obviously Rodgers makes such a huge difference. But that schedule is brutal. If we show the schedule again, I was just thinking about this as I was looking at it. If you could somehow find a way to pair Nick Chubb and Aaron Jones, obviously you'd like to start both those guys from week 1 on. But look what happens when you get to week 7 and how the schedule lightens up for them. I mean, the Raiders, the Chiefs, the Chargers should be decent. The Panthers could be decent. But it's not as brutal as it is in the first 6 weeks of the season just based on those defenses that they're facing. And so if Chubb does have any sort of fall off with Kareem Hunt, it's not a bad stretch until you get to week 15 for using Aaron Jones. So, clearly you'd like to have both those guys in your roster. It's not like you want to just say, I'm going to bench Nick Chubb for Aaron Jones and vice versa. But in terms of like getting RB1 production, it could potentially happen for you. I just think that Jones is a good number 2 running back, but from a guy, like for me, I had him as high as 13. He was one of my, high-end, low-end number 1, high-end number 2 type of guys. I just think they're you throw the injury on top of everything. It's just hard to say that you can guarantee him to be better than Gurley, to be better than Jacobs, to be better than Freeman, when all those guys have, I think, maybe not as many flaws and just as much upside.